Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today we're going to be discussing all the books I read in June. I had a pretty good reading month in July. I finished 12 books, which I'm pretty happy with that number, and I had a lot of really great books. There are quite a few 5 stars. I felt like at one point I was just throwing out the 5-star ratings, and it was odd because we know that I'm usually a very picky bitch. I also feel like I have to talk about this here, but I did participate in the reading rush up until like the last day or two. I think the last day I just quit because I was really unimpressed with their lack of awareness. If you don't know, the Reading Rush is a really popular readathon. I participated in it for most of the week, and then I think on the last day I just gave up and quit because I was really unimpressed with their handling of some things and their lack of awareness. They're being criticized by a lot of the book community right now, and some people are interpreting this as canceling. I'm filming this on the 31st, and they just posted another apology, I think last night, that I am also very unimpressed with, and as far as it stands, I don't think I will be participating again in the Reading Rush. They've had multiple apologies at this point and still haven't actually apologized. It's just, the whole situation is a mess, and it's getting messier, and I'm just not impressed. The first book I read and completed in July was The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. I've been talking about this book for so long. It's honestly so weird for me to say that I've completed it, that it's done, that I've finished it. If you didn't know, The City of Brass is the first book in the series. It follows Nahri, a con woman who accidentally pisses off an angry Jinn spirit, and he actually whisks her off to this mythical city of Daevabad. It's set in 18th century Cairo. I've pitched this so many times. If you are familiar with my channel, you know that I love this series, and I actually put out my first ever reading vlog of my experience reading this. So if you're interested in all my spoiler-filled thoughts, I will leave that linked on the screen. But I love this. This finale felt earned. Stakes and emotions were incredibly high. The story got so complex, I had no idea how our characters were ever going to prevail. It went in directions I wasn't expecting. It also dealt with really tough topics incredibly respectfully. I love our main characters so much. They are definitely in my heart as favorite all-time characters. All 3 of our main characters here, I love them to pieces. Check out my vlog if you want to hear my whole thoughts, but I love this book. I loved it so much, and I am relieved, honestly, about that. After that, I decided to read Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This is an adult contemporary romance that's set at a Ren fair. Our MC is new to town. She's taking care of her sister who just had like a car accident, and she ends up joining the Ren fair. She initially gets off on the wrong foot with the organizer of the event, but when they're in the fair, their characters start kind of falling for one another, and that leads to some confusing feelings to our actual participants. This book honestly disappointed me. I had high hopes and expectations going into it. A lot of people really liked it. They pitched it as a great version of Enemies to Lovers, which I deeply disagree with. While I got on board with their dynamic and kind of banter when they were in their characters, as people, I did not buy their relationship. I didn't understand why they wanted to be together other than maybe initial attraction, and their romance was really like sped up too. Like once they get together, boy do we take off. Like it felt so rushed. Frankly, I think both of the characters needed to be in therapy and working through their own things, because especially our male main character lashes out at our female MC, and I don't like it at all. He is really rude and abrupt, and it's because he's grieving. I'd also like to give a content warning for grief, death of a sibling. He takes it out on people who don't deserve it, and he needs to be in therapy. I know there are planned sequels for this book, and I'd be open, I think, to reading the sequels because I liked the atmosphere of the fair, but our characters fell flat. Their romance definitely fell flat, and I'm disappointed. We're gonna move on. I gave this 3 stars. I then decided to pick up Record of a Spaceborn Few by Becky Chambers. This is the 3rd book in the Wayfarer series, and I thought this was the final book. It's not. There is a 4th book set to come out, and this is a set of companion books. And this book in particular follows like a whole host of humans that are living on this fleet, and that's basically the remnants of humanity, this fleet, and discusses a lot of what it means to be human. There are a lot of perspectives in here. I think there are 5 perspectives, and at the beginning it was a bit difficult for me to figure out who was who and remember everyone's role in the story, just because there were so many perspectives and the book is rather short. Once the threads started interconnecting and everything started coming together, I really appreciated the story and how this was woven together. I loved the discussions of humanity and what it means to be human when you no longer live on Earth and you are in an entirely different place, and your species is actually second class compared to a lot of other species in this world. Also, for representation, there's an FF relationship in here of 2 women who are significantly older, which was nice to see, and that is Own Voices representation. And there's also a bisexual MC, and he's a lot younger. I was so impressed with this. It took me by surprise. It's incredibly slow paced. This is not going to be the story for everyone. A lot of people will significantly like the first 2 books more because there is a bit of action. This one's really slow and meandering, but it really worked for me, and I gave it 5 stars. The next book I read, I knew I was going to love, and boy am I glad that I did, and that's Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. So I can finally tell you what Empire of Sand is about because I've read it. But Empire of Sand follows a girl named Mare who is mixed race. Her father is a really rich leader in this world, but her mother was a part of like these native nomadic people and has actually left Mare. She practices like the old ways of magic kind of in secret, but she makes a mistake and performs magic in public, and that kind of changes everything, and she ends up getting forced into this arranged marriage and swept away off to this incredibly powerful being who wants to use her for his own devices. For representation, basically all the characters in here are brown. Our author is Indian, and it is Own Voices. This book hinges on the crux of the characters. I plan on discussing this fully in my spoiler-free review whenever I manage to get that up, but if you buy into the relationship and the plight of our 2 main characters, you will love this story. I loved Mare as a main character. She was incredibly strong and tough and brave, and her love interest I also really found myself loving because he is put in a terrible position throughout the entire book, and more things are revealed and you realize the depth of the pain and things that he has gone through, yet he is still resilient. I really liked the world building and elements of magic. I really was terrified by our villain. He is terrifying and a really good villain. I would give a content warning for verbal and physical abuse, threat of rape. Check out my full review because I don't think I'm doing this justice right now, but I adored it. I'm sorry if this video sucks. I don't know why I seem so low energy and I can't get my thoughts across. This is wonderful. I hate it here. The next book I read, I have really mixed feelings on, and that's The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This is the first book in an adult fantasy series that follows like a regressed society. Our main character on her 19th birthday gets swept away from this like cohort of men to take her off to be queen, and she has to go from living a life of like in a cottage being raised by 2 people to leading this country that is on the brink of destruction. This book had potential for me to love it, but ultimately I found myself disappointed and I think it fell rather flat. Our main character in here at the beginning is incredibly frustrating, which I know was an intentional part on the author's doing. The growth we got in here I actually did enjoy, but there are a lot of elements surrounding that I didn't like. I didn't like the fact that a lot of the story at the beginning hinged on the fact that characters just refused to give their new queen information. They kept saying, no, we can't, no, we can't, no, we can't. And so for 150 pages, we are operating as blind as our main character, and it's just not a fun reading experience. I would give a content warning for many graphic depictions of rape, slavery, drug use, bodily harm, and general violence. There's a lot of things in here that could be upsetting, especially the depictions of rape and the amount of times rape is used in this story. Honestly, I wasn't a fan of. I thought the writing specifically drew out so much of this story, and it could have been a lot of tighter. A lot of scenes could have been cut shorter and condensed better. I did not like the writing and the way she chose to write this story. Also, the plot was really lacking. Not much happens in here. This is what, a 450 page book, and not much goes on. It's definitely a setup book, but it doesn't really stand well on its own, and that's ultimately why I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars. I may continue on in the series, but it's probably unlikely. I'm disappointed. I was really looking forward to it, but it just didn't quite work for me. The first book I read for the reading rush was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I'm impressed by the story and how much I actually liked the writing style. I found this to be an easy and accessible read. I really enjoyed the parts and learning where like the Disney movie and this book diverged, because growing up I was very familiar with the Disney movie, and while reading it I get it now. It does feel like you are tripping on something, and you can tell that when he was writing this, Mr. Carroll was definitely tripping on a lot of things. I enjoyed it for what it was. It's short children's classic. I gave it 3 stars. I'm glad I read it though. The second I got this book in my hands, I knew that it was going to throw off my TBR and my reading plans, but I couldn't wait to read it, and that is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is an Own Voices novel following a fat black bisexual woman who is also a witch. She is in the process of getting her PhD, and she has no time for romance. All she wants are casual relationships, and is really happy with her choices. And then enter our male main character, Zafir. He is an ex-rugby player and is grieving the loss of his brother and father. He is a security guard in the building that Danny works at. Their feelings start to change for one another when a security drill goes wrong, and Zafir ends up like whisking Danny away to safety, and people end up filming it. The moment goes viral, and they realize that maybe they will follow through on what everyone is talking about online, and feelings ensue. Male main character is of Punjabi descent, and his family are practicing Muslims, even though I don't think he is really practicing. I would give a content warning for death of a parent and sibling, and like severe anxiety and panic attacks. I definitely bought into the romance of this story. I loved our 2 main characters and their dynamic. Zafir outwardly is a grumpy, mean old guy who experiences no joy, but he's secretly incredibly very soft. And Danny also has a harder exterior, but secretly is a bit softer than she would like to admit. And them coming together and experiencing their relationship and romance, I really enjoyed. This has fake dating, which is one of my favorite tropes. I love watching fake dating happen, and I think in this instance it was successful. I thought there was great tension and build up, and their chemistry was like great. I always appreciated the maturity brought to this story, and the fact that these were adults acting like adults. And I really enjoyed the involvement of the family. Admittedly, I didn't care for like the 3rd act stereotypical things that happen in here. I was hoping for like something slightly different, but I do like the way Talia Hibbert handles that, because it's short and it's not a long drawn out messy thing. I loved this. It was a great fun time, and I highly recommend. Oh god, I feel like I've been doing this forever. Again, I'm supposed to be doing this quickly. I also read The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock. I meant to read this like many times, many readathons, and I never have. I finally did, and I'm happy about that. This is a YA historical fiction set in 1960s Alaska, when Alaska is on the brink of, I think, reaching statehood. It follows 4 different main characters and their lives, and how their lives eventually intersect, and how their choices will affect like others around them. I believe 2 of our main characters are Native, but that is not Own Voices representation. This definitely is a book that focuses on the themes rather than like the individual characters, although in the 200 pages I do think our characters are pretty well fleshed out. I would give a content warning for physical assault, possible, hinted towards sexual assault, like parental abuse, and death of a parent. I loved the writing in here. It felt so magical that I couldn't tell that if it was the writing itself or if there was like the slightest element of fabulism in here. I just liked the manner of storytelling. I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. This was a quality quick read. I'm impressed. God, my arm feels like it's falling off and I still have 4 books to talk about. Fuck. We're very quickly going to talk about this book because I have like 0 thoughts about it, and that's Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. I am disappointed. I've been looking forward to reading this book since like 2017. This is an adult sci-fi novel that is told in like case files. The book chronicles the events after a young girl kind of stumbles upon this giant metal hand, and how that affects basically all of the world and humanity, and the ramifications of finding a gigantic metal hand. Had a lot of issues with the construction of this novel, which made like the characters feel very bland, and ultimately I found myself not caring. If you were to compare it to Illuminae by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, that book is significantly more successful in my opinion, because it focuses on the characters and you get to read their interactions. They're just like their little private messages, and you really get to know who they are, and because you know who they are, you care ultimately about what's going on in the story and you're invested in their lives. But this book has none of that. I don't know. I'm unimpressed. I gave it 3 stars. I have the rest of the series, and I do think I will continue just because they are really fast-paced and I'm interested in the overall mystery of what the ramifications of the metal hand are. I then picked up Mouse Volume 1 by Art Spiegelman. This is a graphic novel depicting our author's father's life during World War II, living in Poland as a Jewish man. This depicts mice as Jewish people, cats as Nazis, and I believe Polish people as pigs. This book I found to be incredibly impactful. I read a couple reviews where people didn't like the way that this was told, but I liked the dual timelines. I liked how it was depicted. A lot of people struggled with the fact, I guess, of the art style and the fact that this followed like mice and stuff and they didn't realize why, but I thought it actually really worked and helped the story, although sometimes the art style was a little bit difficult to follow because it's a lot of black and like scribbly sort of things. I didn't give this a rating because it felt uncomfortable to rate someone's experience. So this book I actually finished this morning. I finally finished the audiobook while getting ready to film, and that is The Last Name Sarah by Kristen Cicerelli. This is the first book in a young adult companion trilogy that follows our main character, who is a dragon hunter. As a child, she experienced a really like traumatic burn and was nearly killed because of a dragon. So she has been raised to seek revenge and kill dragons, and she is then tasked by her father, the king, to kill the first dragon, because if she kills the first dragon, then all of like the old wickedness magic stories will die, and then she will finally experience peace. Overall, I did have a very positive experience while reading this book. I was impressed with the writing, especially. I loved the narration. This almost had like a fairy tale-ish quality to it. It it involves a lot of stories and mythos in the world, and then we get to experience the stories themselves, which I thought was a nice touch, and it helps develop like the history of this world as well. I was mildly uncomfortable with the fact that our romantic interest is a slave in this book, and that our main character for a long portion of time A, refuses to learn his name, or B, kind of treat him like a human. I was a little uncomfortable with that at the beginning, although I do like the way things panned out and were addressed at the end, and the development of our main character I really appreciated. A lot of things aren't as they seem, and our main character has been raised in a specific and rigid way, and when things start to crumble, I liked how she navigated that. The plot I found frustrating at points. I didn't like the fact that like it was a little bit stop start repetitive stuff. For the first half it was very repetitive. Some of the experiences and some of the internal monologue and internal conflicts got a little repetitive again, and I would have liked it to switch up a little bit. Overall though, I had a good time with it. I think I'm giving it 4 stars. I'm excited to continue on in the series. I'm probably going to read them via audiobook as well. I mentioned this before, but I'm filming this on July 31st, so I still have a day to complete my book, and I have 50 pages left of Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, and I will insert a clip of myself after I've finished the book. So, it has been a few days since I finished Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan, and I am just as confused as ever how to rate this story or how I feel about it overall. Because my initial gut feeling is to be like, ooh, I like it. Because I like the premise, I like how dark and gruesome it can get, and I like some of the character dynamics between, actually all 3 of them I thought were really interesting and really compelling. But the construction of the story is definitely left me wanting. The writing and certain plot elements definitely needed more development. The plot was definitely rushed, and the way that they kind of like finagle their way into what the plot is supposed to be, and like clearly the characters needed to get from point A to point B, and we didn't quite entirely know how to get there, so we got there with some pretty like ridiculous circumstances, but whatever. The writing though I did struggle with at times, especially when it came to writing action scenes. I thought the action was not well described. There was a lot of things missing that you kind of had to fill in the blanks for yourself. I could talk about this for a long time, and to be honest, I'm debating doing a full review, but I still don't entirely know how I want to rate it. I think at this point in time I'm giving it 3.5, 3.75 out of 5 stars. There was a lot to like in here. I think there's a lot that the series could do that I could really enjoy, but as a first book it doesn't entirely stand on its own, and that's why I think I'm landing with that rating. So that is it for all the books that I read in July. Thank you for sticking with me. I feel like my brain is like foggy right now, so I don't exactly know what I said, so hopefully this video isn't an entire disaster, but I guess we'll see when it's time to edit it. Let me know down in the comments below if you have any thoughts or opinions on any of the books that I read, and maybe while you're down there, mention the best book that you read in July. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I can't speak, and I will see you again very soon. Goodbye.